How does one put this Bulls season into words? A season in which the front office expressed for a need to be better than the prior season, stressing the importance of continuity, a season in which, for the most part, the Bulls were pretty healthy with the exception of Lonzo Ball, of course, and yet the Bulls finished the season 40-42, 10th in the Eastern Conference. And while yes, I realize the season is not over, the Bulls thankfully have the play-in tournament to try and somewhat salvage a lost season by potentially making it in the playoffs, although I'm not going to get my hopes up for that, especially since if this was just a few years ago, the Bulls season would have already been done. But look, I know I've been fairly negative for most of this year, feel like a lot of Bulls fans have, and so in reviewing this season, the regular season that is, I'm going to try my best to look at both the negatives and positives and maybe try to rationalize what happened, what went wrong, and assess the path forward. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Real quick, as you guys know, our partners at Sorare have agreed to be our latest sponsor on the channel, and I couldn't be more excited than to tell you guys about their platform, especially considering it is entirely free to join. It's super fun, and you get to win prizes, collect digital cards and assets in the form of NFTs. Most fantasy sports apps, they are different in that it's actually a fantasy gaming marketplace. There is no gambling or betting of any kind. The site enables you to play where users own their players forever. Think of it like you're a GM creating your own dynasty and you compete weekly in fantasy competitions for great prizes. Users are owners or general managers of their team, making trades, buying and selling players, etc. And unlike other gaming sites or betting platforms, it doesn't cost you anything to play. You can start for free. I've created my own private league where you can compete and play against each other for prizes and offers. So check it out if you're interested. Join my private league. Link to that is in the description. We've got some great people in there. And thanks again to Sorare for sponsoring this video. Now, it's funny because I had to go back and watch my season preview video after the preseason from back in October, and I had pretty high hopes for this Bulls team, like higher than most. I predicted the Bulls were going to win 47 games, which was one more than the previous season. I thought they were going to be better than teams like the Cavs and the Hawks, although they weren't that far off from the Hawks. And I thought guys like Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu were going to have much improved seasons, maybe not breakout seasons, but drastically better than what we saw the year before. Of course, this ended up being wildly wrong. Granted, this was when there was optimism. Lonzo Ball was going to be coming back sometime in the first few weeks of the regular season. So had I known Lonzo was going to miss the entire year, likely would have changed my tune quite a bit. But look, the biggest takeaway from the season, and it's among a lot of things, but the biggest thing in my view that I was quite frankly surprised by was the amount of disengagement, lack of heart, and resiliency from this team throughout the season. Yeah, it got a little better after the All-Star break when the Bulls added Patrick Beverley, but I wouldn't say it shifted dramatically to the point where you were like, this team is now focused and fighting hard in every game. No, it was never there consistently throughout the year. And I know some will say, why are you surprised by that? They were already kind of showing that lack of heart and effort at the end of last season. Yes, but for a team that came up short and disappointed fans at the end of the year, and for a team where some of these guys, meaning the Bulls' big three, given their age and where they are in their careers, you would assume there would have been a bit more urgency to win now. Like, they don't have many years left. This is their opportunity to make some noise now. And a lot of times, they just didn't seem to care. That was the biggest issue that stood out to me from this season. It wasn't the lack of shooting. It wasn't the lack of rim protection or the defense being inconsistent on most nights. It wasn't even the lack of communication, overall flow, and stagnant offense at times. Yes, all of these things were problems that absolutely need to be solved for in the offseason. But it was the fact that too often, the guys just didn't seem to want it. They didn't seem to care. Too weak mentally to let other teams get to them, let other teams get back into games after having very large leads, and getting down on themselves when things weren't going their way. Whether it was from the lack of calls or shots weren't going down, they didn't fight. As a fan, that's what bothers me most, and it's what I want to see from my team in battling it all out there on the court. Now again, the unfortunate circumstance surrounding Lonzo Ball is a huge blow and was a major derail in the Bulls' overall plans for the season. And really for the future, as we obviously learned later on in the season that there is a possibility Lonzo will miss most, if not all, of next season, and of course, the potential of this being career-ending. No one could have expected that. And the loss of Lonzo, his three-point shooting, his defense, as well as his court vision, being that true point guard the Bulls need to facilitate their offense, was a huge hit. But what I will say that was a positive from the season as it relates to the point guard position was Coby White's improved play. And this is coming from someone who often critiqued Coby quite a bit. Didn't think he was a good fit on the Bulls given how heavy they were in the backcourt. Thought he was way too inconsistent and didn't have much upside overall. But Coby despite the numbers being down, his overall numbers being down because of his overall usage, greatly improved his defense, his ball handling, decision making, passing, taking care of the ball, and limiting turnovers. Yeah, the shooting has still been inconsistent. Overall scoring in general has been inconsistent, but it's the other areas that he has done consistently well throughout the season. And he was one of the few players that actually hustled when he was on the court, was always ready every time he came in. Patrick Williams, and I mentioned this in the post-game video against the Pistons. Yeah, it wasn't the breakout year we were hoping for. Yeah, he's still not nearly as aggressive as we would like to see him be in games, but he did make strides as it relates to his on-ball defense. He was more aggressive on offense and really becoming a more versatile scorer with his ability to finish at the rim, shoot it from the mid-range as well as downtown. He's been able to create his shot more effectively rather than being a catch-and-shoot player from the corner. Obviously, still a lot of work and improvement left for Pat, and the way he started this season was pretty bad, as he was being super passive, was barely touching the ball in the game. People were calling him Passive Pat, but he changed his tune quite a bit a couple months into the year and has since played a lot better. I've also kind of just thrown the number 4 pick out the window because people get mad that he's not breaking out into the star for how high the Bulls drafted him, but that was a pretty meh draft class overall, and the development and improvement has been there. I'm not as focused as much anymore on the fact that he was the number 4 pick. Now back to the negatives on the season though. The big three, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic, as talented as they all are with their own skill sets, they simply don't work together as a unit. They've had some nice games together. There are times where the offense is going smoothly with the three of them on the court, but for the most part, the fit is bad. I mean, you talk about two ball-dominant, high-volume scoring players in DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, one of which who doesn't really help spread the floor, and for a big man like Vucevic, who's supposed to be that big that can spread the floor, hasn't really been the case throughout his time in Chicago because of his average outside shooting. And at the same time, though, Vucevic not getting the touches and shots he should be getting because Zach and DeMar are taking the bulk of shots is limiting his strengths, especially when you're not playing through him in the paint against teams that are going small, which is a lot of teams in the NBA now. The other thing for me, as it relates to the big three, not enough consistent defense from them, not enough effort as a unit, and they all complain and whine too much on the court when they're not getting calls while teams are already on the other end of the floor getting an easy basket in a 4-on-5 possession. You saw that happen way too many times this season. And then finally, as it relates to the big three, lack of leadership. None of these guys exude leadership. DeMar to an extent because he really does try and mentor the younger players. He's talking to them and working with them on the court. He's doing things with them outside of basketball. But when it really comes to having a true leader, a veteran voice, Bulls just don't have that. And it really should start with the big three. Yeah, sure, Pat Bev kind of had that role once he joined the team, getting in guys' faces, holding them accountable for when they were making mistakes, but it's not the same thing when it's a player coming midway through the season, and it's obviously also not one of your best players that the team looks to. Lack of leadership was a big problem for the Bulls this season. And that even goes to Billy Donovan as well. Like, I know coaches aren't the ones missing shots and turning the ball over and missing assignments, but it's on coaching to get in guys' faces when they're screwing up, or not putting in maximum effort, or trying to inspire players when things maybe aren't going their way. Billy Donovan has been known to be a player's coach, but that might be to the team's detriment when you're too much of a pleaser in that sense. Now, I think some of the bigger disappointments from the season, one has to be a guy like Ayo Dosunmu, who had such a good rookie year, such a great story and outperforming relative to his expectations as a second-round pick. Not saying Ayo had an awful season, especially considering he was thrust into the starting role with no Lonzo Ball, but he just wasn't as effective or efficient as he was in his rookie year. Very inconsistent shooter, borderline bad shooting really, wasn't as impactful when it came to his overall passing, and in hindsight, given how well Kobe has actually showed up, probably should have gone with Kobe in the starting lineup over Ayo to start the year before they brought in Patrick Beverley, of course. I get it, because you put Kobe in the starting lineup, Bulls defense is going to be terrible, but it's not like Ayo was even being that impactful on that end of the floor to start the season. But either way, was a bit of a letdown from Ayo having such a promising rookie season. And then, I don't know if I should consider this to be a disappointment because he was still great on the defensive end, but that's Alex Caruso. There wasn't the same level of energy from AC that we saw from last year. Too often you would see him losing his man, playing off the ball on defense. Like, he's an incredible on-ball defender, arguably one of the best in the league. But when he was playing off the ball, he was missing assignments, not reading switches, and as it relates to his offense, which I know AC has never really been an offensive player, but this season, I mean, the Bulls could not rely on him for what seemed like any offensive production whatsoever. Averaged 5.6 points per game on just 4 attempts. was much more passive on offense this year. Again, you can't be too mad because he gives it his all on the court as it relates to being a pest on defense, but it just wasn't the same level of impact that we saw from Alex Caruso compared to last season. And then, of course, Andre Drummond had a decent season, but also a bit of an up and down year. Struggled with his consistency, but a serviceable backup big. Would have liked to see more from Andre. Like, there was a period of time where he was out of the rotation. Derrick Jones Jr., an okay year, had some nice moments, but nothing groundbreaking. Dalen Terry, the rookie, didn't get to see him much. Would have been nice to actually see him get some more minutes, as he could have brought a lot of energy onto the court, but I get it, he's still very raw as a player. Some of the biggest stats overall for the Bulls as a team: dead last in threes attempted and dead last in threes made, although 16th in terms of overall 3-point percentage, 28th in offensive rebounding, 22nd in rebounding overall. So it kind of hits on the point we've been harping on all season. Lack of shooting, specifically outside shooting, lack of size and bigs to crash the boards, especially when it comes to creating second chance opportunities. I think the biggest surprise though was just how well the Bulls finished on defense, at least as it relates to their defensive rating. 5th in the NBA on defense, 7th in the league in points allowed, and an overall net rating of 13th, but their offense is where they really struggled. And when you look at a team like the Bulls on paper, you would think this was going to be a dominant team on offense while struggling on defense. Just goes to show the poor offensive fit from the Bulls' big three. Anyway, a season most of us would probably like to forget. A season we probably wish we hadn't invested so much time into, although who am I kidding? I love Bulls basketball no matter what. But a season you would hope would inform some concrete decisions to be made in the offseason. We've got the play-in game though on Wednesday, at least we have that to look forward to. I'll have a preview video out on the play-in game tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that. Until then, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.